So now let's move to a panel conversation on abiding together in the life and power. After we introduce our panelists, we will have some expectant silence, and then our friend John will rise and say farewell to our junior gathering friends. This panel is a conversation amongst three friends from different traditions.
Margery Post Abbott. Marge is a released friend whose ministry is held under the care of Multnomah Monthly Meeting in North Pacific Yearly Meeting, our yearly meeting. She has traveled widely among friends, led a variety of workshops, and published articles and books on Quaker faith and practice. Marge co-authored Quakerism, the Basics with Carl Abbott, her husband.
Cherice Bock. Cherice grew up among friends in Oregon and served as founding co-clerk of Sierra Cascades Yearly Meeting. As a leader with Oregon Interfaith Power and Light, her advanced degrees in theology, environmental studies prepared her to advocate and organize with people of faith and to teach at the seminary and undergraduate levels.
And our third panelist, Gretchen Castle. Gretchen has served Quaker organizations across the theological spectrum of Friends as General Secretary for Friends World Committee for Consultation in London, England, presiding clerk of Philadelphia Yearly Meeting. She's worked for Friends General Conference, Friends Services for the Aging, Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, and Pendle Hill. Gretchen is a member of Doylestown Friends Meeting in Philadelphia Yearly Meeting. She's sojourning at First Friends Richmond, which is part of New Association of Friends. As a graduate of Earlham College and the current dean of Kate's alma mater, the Earlham School of Religion, Gretchen has returned to her Quaker roots in Richmond, Indiana.
Gretchen, Cherice, and Marge will each address three queries they are asking themselves. They will share about their context among friends, their own experiences personally and communally, abiding in the life and power, and the future of friends. After each of the panelists has addressed a query, there will be a pause for friends to silently consider the query for yourselves. After closing, there's a book table at the back of the room and an opportunity to speak with these three friends at the front of the room.
And Junior Gathering friends, we want to thank you for being here and say we hope you have a wonderful rest of your program tonight. And we hope that many of us will see you tomorrow twice at 1:30 for intergenerational worship, including stories and crafts projects, and at 7 p.m. for the dance with DJ Ola. Thank you. Thank you for letting me get that message in, hon.
Things never go as planned. So now, friends, let's gather our hearts and minds together in expectant silence.
I want to start off just by thanking you for bringing the three of us together and giving us this opportunity, this excuse to talk with each other in depth about what's closest to our hearts. So it has been quite a gift just to prepare for this time. And tonight, the three of us will share in conversation with each other of times when we've been able to say, along with George Fox, this I know experimentally. At a recent retreat, as I was preparing for this plenary, someone spoke out of the silence about her love of words and the many different meanings that some words take on. She especially delighted us with multiple meanings of the word tender. As I listened, I suddenly realized she was reading from my book. My book, about being broken and tender, was being used to give me a message. In part, this book was saying how tenderness towards all people, no matter how they define their faith, is one result of the divine encounter. I delight in the multiple meanings of tenderness. Her wound may be tender, or we may feel tender towards a newborn. It has connotations of healing, of caring for others, and awareness. It reminds me to live lightly and to hold up the well-being of those around me. This ministry offered that day in worship began by noting the centrality of love, but also then suggested how being tender expands on our understanding of what love is all about. As this woman spoke, and I realized that these words were clearly meant for me, I could look at myself and see how rapidly my life is changing and how it's leaving me often disoriented, at times quite angry with myself when things that I used to do with ease become obstacles. Now more than ever, I need to be tender with myself as I face very personal complications of age and disease, yet also the fears and disorientation of the world around us all. I suspect many of you can say the same. This very recent experience reminded me about how 30 years or more ago, there was a time when thinking about a time when I had never spoken in worship. One Sunday back then, I felt a strong impulse to stand and speak, and even was given all the words I was supposed to say. But my fear overcame even that strong impulse. But not long after, a few minutes later, after having refused to listen to this clear, distinct directive, I was taken aback when somebody else stood and spoke out of the silence, almost word for word, the message I was supposed to speak. It is equally strange in 2023 to hear someone else speak words I wrote and know that they today were offered as a message to me now. These two particular Sundays, in many ways, bracket my central experience of God, of the love and power that is beyond knowing. The earlier time was the first time I experienced direct guidance. Its guidance was unmistakable, even though I refused to respond and listen to it. The second, a very recent ministry, reminds me of how over the years I've come to learn that listening does not require silence. I can hear that guidance in the words spoken when someone else, in pop songs, and in any of the many noisy or even chaotic times in our lives. A third experience I want to mention briefly is when I felt joy, even while grieving. In the midst of what was definitely a popcorn meeting, I was just crying my eyes out. And in this unlikely space where an old man rambled on and on and on, and yet those words all ended up coming together in a calling for me to not only speak and teach, but to really explore the relationships among friends of different traditions. And binds us together as friends. Among the many lessons, I've come to see the importance of stilling your mind, no matter what the outward conditions. And this message that most recently came with me is this lovely reminder that even if I refuse to follow the guidance I've been offered, someone else will be nearby to take it up. It's not all on me. So as I felt these strong, loving arms around me when I was crying in meeting, I knew I was immersed in the reality of a love and power that could hold me safe, no matter what the loss, no matter what the pain, no matter the inadequacies I might feel, and how I sensed almost overwhelmed by them. The fears that had governed my life did not disappear, but change was my response. I'd come to know the strength that allowed me to act rather than hide, to be tender with myself and others. There's so much more that's so rich, but I'd like to hear what you have to say about this, Gretchen. I know you have lots to bring to this conversation.
Thank you, Marge. I'd love to hear you go on and on. It's so rich. Thank you for the richness of and your ability to put into words what a lot of us experience. Growing up in Indiana and Iowa as the daughter of a Quaker pastor meant that I was fully embedded in Friends United meeting among pastoral friends. I loved going to church. I loved going to our youth group, which included other denominations. And I loved going to Quaker camp, even though my parents would take us out in the rowboat for a separate worship in order to avoid having to endure altar calls. Now, to be fair, a lot of programmed meetings don't do altar calls. I don't want you to get that impression, but in Indiana Yearly Meeting, that was a regular thing. My father was an excellent pastor, relaying stories that even I, as a child, could relate to. Our church provided a very strong community in which to grow and to develop spiritual formation. My family traveled among unprogrammed friends and welcomed friends from other countries into our home. It was rich and full. And I remember when I was about 15 years old and I was sitting on this big sort of hill. It was one of my favorite spots where by our house. And I would go up there to think a lot. And at 15, lots of things churning in there. But I remember thinking that if I were to die tomorrow, I've already lived a really rich and full life. Now, luckily, I've gone on to live a few more years, but and it continues to be rich and full. I spent 25 years in Philadelphia Yearly Meeting and learned to really love unprogrammed worship too. And I wonder how many of you, raise your hand if you have lived in Philadelphia Yearly Meeting or do live in Philadelphia Yearly Meeting now. Oh, yeah, that's great. Quite a few of you.
Yeah.
We keep discovering things about each other, which has really been fun. Yeah, but I thank you, Philadelphia, for indulging me, a Midwesterner, to become clerk of the yearly meeting. And I wasn't the first one, as Arthur Larrabee will tell you, but it was wonderful to be drawn into that community in a beautiful way, even given my background. So at age 25, I was employed by FGC, and I went to my very first central committee full of anticipation. And there, a friend asked about my upbringing as a programmed friend. And he claimed blithely that I was not a real Quaker. I was cut to the heart. It was really hard. I was incensed, but I realized that it was his lack of experience, his lack of exposure to the breadth of Quaker experience that lay behind his comment. And so I couldn't let that go. We did what any 25-year-old would do. We stayed up till 2 a.m. talking. And as Lauren said last night, I would insert at this point, nevertheless, she persisted. So it was as General Secretary of the Friends World Committee for Consultation in the World Office in London that I had the full opportunity to articulate the value and joy in experiencing Quaker diversity. This is where I learned a new meaning of abiding together in the life and power. Spiritual hospitality comes in many forms across the world. I noticed, for instance, that some people were rearranging their furniture in order to accommodate my staying overnight. I found all food really tasty and delicious because I knew that there were lots of sacrifices made in order to feed me. And traveling long distances through mud and hurricanes, I can tell you stories, I won't go into that, but just to allow me to visit with another group of friends and sitting for worship under the acacia trees in Turkana in Kenya, with nursing babies, drums, dancing. All of this is Quaker. I used to have a photo that I would use in PowerPoints that had the whole people of Turkana sitting under an acacia tree for worship. And in the middle sat Bruce Burchard. And my caption for that story was, "Find the Quakers," because they were all Quakers. Yeah. So reciprocity is inherent in spiritual hospitality. It's that reciprocity of learning from each other, listening from the heart, and experiencing the love of God over and over and over again. And again from Lauren, here I'll insert, it was then she knew she could change the world. Closer? Okay, thank you. I'm deaf in one ear, so I appreciate when people tell me to do it a little differently. I'll try to, can people hear me now? Okay, let me know if I slip down again. People often would ask me what we friends have in common across the world. And my answer is, we all share a love of God, or the indescribable, or whatever we want to call it. I don't care what word we use, but we all have that sense that we are loved. We seek spiritual guidance in our decision making, and we all seem to love and work for peace and justice. And we are doggedly persistent. And I love that about being a Quaker, because we never give up. We never give up. I would often, in speaking with groups of friends, talk about the spectrum that we, among friends, where the primacy of the Bible is at one end of the spectrum, continuing revelation is at the other part of that continuum. And we all lie somewhere in there. It really only has to do with the primacy. What is it that's primary about our worship and how we practice? So we all are on that continuum somewhere. We are connected through God's Spirit across cultures and different traditions. We can bridge language differences when we speak the language of the heart. We are connected through our ancestors, mine who left England in the late 1600s to avoid persecution as Quakers. And we are connected by the common stories of the Bible, connecting us across time and drawing us into fresh interpretations through continuing revelation. So what does it mean to abide together in the life and power? Quakerism means everything to me. In Quakerism, I find a way to be, a way to live and abide in that life and power, expressing my unwavering love of God. I have committed my life to working among friends, and I feel an urgency to continue to sink deep, to discover God's place within me, within my Quaker meeting, within my work at the Earlham School of Religion, among the larger society of friends, and to participate with you and with God in this magnificent co-creation. Cherice, let's hear from you.
Thank you. I too want to express so much gratitude for this chance to get to spend so much time with these lovely women. We met on Zoom every few weeks for the last several months, and it was so fun when I would see that appointment on my calendar coming up later in the day. And, oh, I get to hang out with Gretchen and Marge. So this has been really fun. We spent time really thinking about the theme of this week, listen so that we may live, and what do we have to say about that? And so focused on this theme of abiding together in the life and power, that we abide as we listen, we abide, we remain, we live in that space with the Spirit and with one another. We experience the life and the power of the Spirit flowing through us and our communities. So this is sort of a culmination of all of those conversations that we got to have. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you. I also want to express my gratitude for my traveling elder, Dove John. Thank you so much for processing with me and being alongside and holding me in the life and power. So I'll share a little bit about my own background and context among friends and what it means to me particularly to abide together in the life and power. I grew up in a somewhat unusual friends space in that I attended an unprogrammed meeting within an evangelical friends meeting, yearly meeting. So my parents and some of their friends started that a few years before I was born. I think 2 or 3 of them are in this room, and only one of them is my mother. So that was here in Oregon on Kalapuya land. My parents raised me in that meeting, and that was a great place to be. It was under the care of Northwest Yearly Meeting, and I was able to really learn from the rich heritage of different branches and styles of the Quaker tradition. The main benefit for me growing up of Northwest Yearly Meeting was the great youth program that they have. So I then attended programmed and unprogrammed meetings at different times in my life, depending on where I was living since then. From my meeting and from training through the youth program in middle school and high school, I learned friends' traditions of abiding together in the life and power through powerful times of unprogrammed worship at camps, through intense and meaningful discernment in meetings for worship, for business, at Youth Yearly Meeting, and in times of personal stillness and seeking. I became a convinced friend when I was in high school and learned more about the Friends' history of social action and non-cooperation with war. While it's also been important to me to learn about ways Friends did not live up to their ideals, the fact that they were at least working on anti-slavery, women's rights, and other topics relating to love of neighbor and enemy was really inspiring. I also experienced a powerful time of abiding together in the life and power when I had the opportunity to go to the World Gathering of Young Friends in 2005 in England. I saw one person wearing that t-shirt yesterday, so that was pretty exciting. Any other World Gathering members, I'd love to reconnect. And young adult Quakers from all over the world attended, and that was a moment to connect deeply with the wider body of friends and to deepen those relationships and understanding across traditions. The focus for that gathering was the passage in John 15, where Jesus says, "I am the vine, you are the branches," and encourages us to abide in the vine. We can abide in the same vine, even though we're from different branches. Abiding means living, growing, being connected, sharing roots and lifeblood. We put in our World Gathering epistle, we learned that the great presence in our lives can be called by many names: Jesus, Christ, God, inner light, spirit, love, or many others. Ultimately, through listening to the spirit that moved us, not the words in which we expressed our movement, we strived to become one organism, one body made up of many parts. As I grew up and worked on discerning what social justice issue I and we as a religious society friends are particularly called to at this time in history, I realized the environmental and climate issues underpinning the occasion for all wars. If we're to abide together in the life and power that takes away the occasion for all wars, if we're to abide in the vine together, we have to pay attention to the literal vine, the soil, the air, and the water. Our peace and justice work necessarily includes our bodies and the body of the earth. So I decided to focus on environmental care, centering environmental justice movements and climate justice. If we don't have clean air, water, and soil, if we don't have a livable temperature, the other justice issues will become moot. This isn't just about conflict and peacemaking, but it's becoming increasingly obvious in the last few years that we're headed quickly toward climate catastrophe. Monday had the hottest global temperature average since records began until Tuesday.
I didn't know that.
This is the drop everything and focus on this issue of our time. And it intersects with all the other justice issues friends care about. In the last several years, I've experienced abiding together in the life and power, sometimes, not generally, with Quakers, also with Quakers, other times not with Quakers, but with activists and organizers around climate and racial justice. During the racial justice uprising that was particularly acute in Portland in 2020, it was so moving to be part of a group willing to show up in solidarity and with a commitment to real justice, to system change. The community helped feed those who were hungry and make sure everyone had masks that could withstand tear gas. I participated with a group of interfaith clergy. They let me participate since I'm a recorded Quaker minister. And we were able to live in the life and power to intentionally spiritually ground those spaces and to bear witness. Another space of experiencing a powerful time of abiding together in the life and power was when I got the opportunity to go to the Treaty People Gathering in Minnesota. In the summer of 2021, the Anishinaabe people invited activists to come and resist the Line 3 pipeline together. It reminded us that we're all treaty people. It's all of our responsibility to care for each other. And at the very least, follow the treaties made between European Americans and Indigenous people. At that gathering, I felt really connected to others and the land through singing together and through rituals to connect us with the land and the community of all life around us. These are incredibly powerful experiences of abiding together, bringing our bodies, our full selves, to refuse to participate in unjust systems and to build the world and community we want to see. We'll just take a moment and pause and reflect and give you a moment to abide together in the life and power and attend how the Spirit is moving in you. And then we'll share on a second query that we brought for ourselves. Thank you for taking that bit of space to abide together in this moment. In the first query, we talked about our own context within the Quaker tradition and our personal experiences of abiding together in the life and power. For this second query, we're going to consider how we notice this ideal of abiding together in the life and power functioning, or maybe not, in friends' communities. I get to go first. As I shared in the first query, I love the Friends' ideals of peace, equity, justice, and discerning together, and waiting together to listen and hear from the Spirit. These have been so meaningful to me. There's that of God in everyone. Each person is a potential conduit for the Spirit to speak into our gathered meetings for worship and meetings for worship for business and other actions that we might take, whether we're gathered in worship or not. So ideally, that's great. We abide together. We listen to the Spirit. We abide in the Spirit. We listen collectively. We act collectively in ways that are equalizing. Each person has a voice. Some historical friends have followed leadings and played significant roles in social justice movements and in resolving conflict in ways that are other than violence. All these things have really drawn me to Friends. That we're a group that sometimes actually lives out our faith in radical and courageous ways, based in love and care. For me, one of the things that has also unfortunately formed my understanding of Friends is that my yearly meeting split about 6 years ago. Several meetings were forced out in 2017, and we formed Sierra Cascades Yearly Meeting of Friends. So although I had a really positive experience of abiding together in the life and power as a youth and really listening to the Spirit and being taught how to do that, it was a painful and disillusioning experience when that process did not work. When my yearly meeting did not abide together in the life and power, did not stay together to find a way forward, did not take the time to discern collectively through listening to the Spirit. Also, we split over LGBTQ plus marriage and ministry. And so this was disillusioning and angering to see friends in my and other yearly meetings split over this question of equality, which Friends are supposed to be about. This has been obviously formative and challenging for me and for many friends in yearly meetings that have experienced splits. This makes it pretty difficult to stay Quaker when the community who taught us corporate discernment, that if we listen to the Spirit, we can eventually discern together the way forward. The community that taught us this decided not to practice it. I see this as a symptom of an underlying problem within the Friends tradition. Since Friends formed in England and came to the United States through church and state-sponsored colonization, settlement, enslavement, genocide, and land theft, and also spread Quakerism to the other parts of the world in ways that enforce Western imperialism, there's a lot of white supremacy that has made its way into our practices, even though Friends have tried to live a different way. White Friends tended to not really notice that they were stealing land from Indigenous people, for example. Friends went along with slavery for quite a while before they collectively took a stand against it. And even today, we have a lot of power imbalances in the way that our Quaker process works, with unspoken and unexamined power dynamics at play under the surface regarding who we consider weighty friends and why. Many young adult friends left Quakerism altogether because of this split. And maybe most of you here can pat yourselves on the back and say, we're fine because we haven't split. But what was really going on here was broken trust, disillusionment, and loss of meaning. We'd experienced abiding together in the life and power in incredibly powerful ways. We'd been taught this is how Quakers do things. And we'd been taught that Friends participate in radical action for social transformation in the time periods in which they lived, even if not perfectly. But we saw none of this remotely in action. And although this was evangelical Friends, I would say it's only slightly better in Friends United Meeting, Friends General Conference, and unaffiliated Friends groups I've seen. Our future as friends depends on whether we're actually going to live out our ideals and build transformative spaces in our communities, or whether we're going to continue to go along as relatively normal Americans who cry peace, peace when there is no peace. So for me, this is what friends need to ask ourselves if we're to have a future. I have a book back there called A Quaker Ecology, Meditations on the Future of Friends. And what I'm really asking in terms of the future of friends is whether we are collectively going to practice abiding together in the life and power that takes away the occasion for all wars. Currently, many of us are really living in the life and power that creates the occasion for wars. We may talk about peace, but do we actually put our bodies on the line to halt oppressive systems? As I spoke earlier, one of the things that we have to take action on now is climate change. We need to actually do something radical to halt and reverse the climate emergency. So far, white Quakers have moved across the so-called Americas and colonized other places, extracting resources and labor. Friends haven't really done much that's significantly different from others in the United States. We've basically gone along with the assumptions of manifest destiny. What if friends had said when we arrived here, no, we're not going to participate with stealing land. We're not going to participate with forced assimilation boarding schools. We're going to learn how to belong to this land, how to be good neighbors. Now, friends continue to use more than our fair share of resources, polluting the planet with fossil fuels and plastics and other toxins, and causing all sorts of habitat destruction, overuse of resources, sacrifice zones, let alone creating a planet that is quickly moving toward being too hot to live on. This is a more dire situation than any humanity has yet faced. Although friends talk a lot about discernment and action, about abiding in the life and power of the present spirit who takes away the occasion for all wars, I don't see much evidence of it. And so abiding together in the life and power, I think, needs to include abiding. We need to commit to a place and be present there and participate in the healing of that place. I'll share more about that in a moment, but I'll just leave it here. How we have so far been collectively abiding has run our planet into the ground. We've made individual decisions about our personal wealth and immediate comfort. We've not been willing to actively resist imperial expansion in solidarity with oppressed groups. We've not interrupted systems of overuse and overextraction, or patterns of wealth accumulation at the expense of vulnerable groups. Instead, many of us participate fully in these systems and profit by them. It makes me wonder, is abiding together in life and power a warm and fuzzy feeling when we have a gathered meeting for worship? Or does this life and power make any actual claim on us? I know I started off this second question with something pretty heavy, and I think it needs to be said up here at the top. And I think we can also gain some hope from the ways we are abiding together in the life and power well. So Marge, I think you're going to take us in that direction. Follow that, sorry.
Thanks. You may notice some people around with red dots on their nose. These are members of my anchor committee. And they're very convinced that I need to put more laughter in my life. I've tried many very ways to do that. And some of that is response to, just listen to the kinds of things that we are facing. All of us. And I think this is true across all traditions of friends. None of us are free of these challenges. None of us in the world are really free from these challenges. Central to my call to a ministry of writing about friends was a double task. One was admitting my own prejudices about other friends. I could have been taken up and given a lecture by Gretchen. I knew those were not friends. They had pastors when what can I say? But that knowing that about myself, how wrong I could be, and accepting the validity of those folks who I thought were quite different from myself. And they had, they might actually have a better idea, some of them, about who Quakers are and how we live that out than I do. I find the willingness to reach out and engage with others whose practices seem alien. Here in the Northwest, I've been very fortunate to be among a community of women that has taught me much about listening. A community of women who've been willing to turn deep inside to find the deep tenderness of the heart connections which transform our lives and which can be aided or damaged by the community around us. Literally, hundreds of us here have grown through our experience of love and power over the decades, as have some of the women in the Northwest, Midwest, and Kenyan women who've used prayer to try to break down some of the tribal barriers. But the human tendency to want to be among like-minded people keeps splitting our communities in all too painful ways, as Cherice has laid out pretty clearly. In the early years of my being part of a group of women who were engaging across the tradition of friends, we did an awful lot of apologizing. And we were constantly asking, will it offend you if I say this? Will it offend you if I do this particular thing? It was a slow process of learning to be honest with one another, and willing to look foolish in our ignorance. And over the years, we have starting in 1995, we had established out here women's theology conferences that have been, I think, really important, at least for those of us who participated in it, just in personal growth and that really deep listening despite our differences. And the format of our women's conferences was always grounded in personal experience, a practice that kept us from arguing over the meaning of words and allowing space to know and accept each other without having to defend our different belief systems against the prejudices of others. This decision in some ways reminds me of the practice of Friends Committee on National Legislation and the Quaker UN office to provide space for people of different political parties and nations to sit together and talk quietly out of the public eye, place to engage without feeling they had to tear each other down. Practicing vulnerability and developing a language of a heart is an ongoing task for all of us. I got a strong taste of this in a different way when I was pressed to attend the first International Holiness Clergy Women's Conference, which the Quakers helped to organize. In that place, evangelicals had to watch over me, prompt me about what to expect, and help me talk through what I was experiencing. As a very, very liberal friend, it blew me away to be there. Much was and still is alien to me. Yet surprisingly, 400 evangelical pastors, 200 of them from the Salvation Army officers in full dress uniform, taught me much about being a friend and the important contributions Quakers can make towards recreating church structures and envisioning a community that is fundamentally different from the mainstream of society. This engagement with the other traditions can be transformative in many ways. One evangelical woman had gotten involved in planning for the Women's Theology Conferences has told me several times, actually often laughing, about how upset she was when the planning committee decided to meet at her church because one of the committee members was a lesbian. This woman waited anxiously as they all arrived, and as they did, she found that all she could see in the face of the lesbian was the face of Jesus. And she soon became a passionate, inviting voice in her yearly meeting for equal rights. One other criteria included for these women's conferences was a commitment to restrain from attempting to change others. And for many years, we made sure that equal numbers of participants were from each yearly meeting, so no one was isolated. We sought to create a welcoming space for theologically liberal women to get a taste of other forms of worship and to learn new ways of reading the Bible and reinterpreting toxic passages. Musically gifted women taught us songs they had written that could draw us together. Similarly, the often socially conservative women could encounter lesbians in a safe environment and start to peel away those prejudices. Since early on, few people knew each other, we purposely did not put church or meeting affiliations on their name tags. That's what that sentence is. And so we had to engage with the person and not the image. More than one evangelical had the experience of a lively biblical discussion, only have to readjust her thinking completely when the woman she was conversing with started going on about my partner, she. So I cherish the many strong relationships we have built, but we, as Cherice has already told us, we still could not prevent the separation out here. Could not be free of that yet. But that's one of those challenges to carry on into the future. So, Gretchen, what do you have to add to this conversation?
Yeah, well, let's see. Let's see what I can add. It just takes patience and relationship building, doesn't it? It's just over and over we learn what it takes to deal with diversity. I want to talk a bit about diversity among friends and the importance of valuing and nurturing and really working within our meetings to care for our meetings. And I'm reminded being here, it's just so amazing to be together. It's magical, isn't it? We just are meeting people heart to heart and laughing and appreciating each other and our differences. It's remarkable. I'll interject that Parker Palmer spoke at ESR at the Earlham School of Religion in April, and we had 300 people attending online and in person. And one of the people, he was asked at the end about diversity and about our meetings not being very racially diverse. And his answer was this. He said, any meeting needs to talk about its own diversity. And if I was a person coming into a new meeting, I would want that meeting to have talked a lot about its own diversity. And it's not just about racial diversity. You get 2 or 3 together and you have 2 or 3 different elements that you can talk about. So I thought that was rather profound. So when 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I, said Jesus. So Jesus is among us, God is among us, the indescribable is among us. And we're lucky to have this kind of gathering, to have our yearly meeting gatherings, to have world plenaries and world conferences. All of those are magical, but it's the deep meeting experience that's at the core of our Quaker experience. And I'm reminded of how full, how large we used to be. I mean, I heard somebody recently talk about a Byberry meeting in Philadelphia yearly meeting, where in the mid 1800s, there were 600 members of that meeting, for which they built their historic meeting house. Today, there are 15 members, and they're working hard to honor that building and to grow as a meeting. And I put that up against our current challenges. I mean, political divisions, reckless intentions to destroy democracy, the blatant destruction of the gains we've made as feminists, which many of us spent a lot of our lives doing. Not to mention the unapologetic ways people have been maligned as laws are passed to restrict and reject people of color, LGBTQ, friends. I could go on, and I'll stop there. Right. But it does lead me to question, why aren't our meetings just full? You know, why aren't we bursting at the seams? Because I believe we have a lot to share with the world. I find the most challenging situation across the world in terms of an ability to accept our differences. And I think the challenge is greater here in the US than most anywhere I've been. We have a lot to overcome. Our history and our culture and the ways in which Quakerism has developed in the Americas provides us with real challenges which friends in other parts of the world struggle to understand. I was asked questions about the US often, from gun control to, how are Quakers organized over there? What are these layers of, FGC and Friends United Meeting and evangelical friends? They just have a hard time understanding that. I experienced the life and power of being together in the breadth of Quaker diversity and in the generosity within our Quaker family. And it's in our American cultural experience that we can be quick to judge and quick to reject others. I don't understand that, honestly, but I think it is cultural, and that's a lot of it. As a culture, we struggle with difference and with conflict. These cultural norms that hold our society and our religious society back. And I heard from a friend just recently, they were having a struggle within their meeting. And this person was told by another person in the meeting, well, if you don't like it, you should just leave. We should never say that to another friend. I mean, wow, that says a lot to me about the state of where we are. Cherice has shared so much about the split within her yearly meeting, and I'm troubled by what Steve Angel and Chuck Fager call the separation generation. I do not doubt that these splits are heart-wrenching and difficult. It's something that we all would like to avoid. But here we are. But I want to name this. It is our difficulty with difference in our American culture that brings us to these conflictual places. As friends, my fervent hope is that we could learn to live better with difference and to be a model for the world. And I want to just share about Ireland Yearly Meeting. Has anyone attended Ireland Yearly Meeting? A few people have. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Ireland Yearly Meeting, Northern Ireland, of course, is its own country. It's part of the United Kingdom, and the Republic of Ireland, it's all on the same island. So the yearly meeting, the Quaker Yearly Meeting, incorporates both countries, Northern Ireland and the Republic. Now, like Cherice's, in your experience of your early meeting, the friends in Northern Ireland described their worship as evangelical unprogrammed, right? Yeah. And, everything doesn't fit neatly into our categories, right? But Northern Ireland, they are so committed to each other. So at yearly meeting, you might have Bible study in one room and unprogrammed worship in the next. And the next morning, everybody will have switched around. Everybody kind of loves it all and they'll participate in all of that. But they would say, and to a friend, you could ask them this, they would always say, we will never split up. There's nothing that can separate us from each other, nothing, because we're together, we're a family, we're a yearly meeting, we have lots of differences, we can talk about those, and they'll tease each other about it. There was, I was doing a presentation and one of my slides was Jesus Lane meeting, I forget, it's in Cambridge, I think. Anyway, somebody stood up asking me questions and they said, Gretchen, you never used Jesus once in your presentation. I said, it was in the slide. But he wanted me to have more of an evangelical presentation than I did. So, but they would never split up, and they're clear about that. I'm counting on Cherice and Marge to help me understand how we can strengthen our meetings and draw more people into this religious and communal experience that we treasure so much. We cherish community. We're quick to build community wherever we are. It's a gift. It's a gift we have. Yet so many of our meeting communities struggle to remain relevant. And Cherice, I appreciate your speaking to that. I serve on the Shoemaker Fund and on the Urgent Call Steering Committee, both of which carry this concern for our monthly meetings. We're searching and listening, recognizing that as a few older friends with lots of leadership experience, that we can speak boldly to this, and we're trying to do that. So I want to just, in closing, I want to share 5 things that have come up this week that I've heard friends talk about that might help our meetings, help us strengthen our meetings. Number 1, we must strengthen our monthly meetings. That's the core. It's the core of our community. It forms the basis of our communal spiritual life. And I've heard ideas about merging meetings where we can to require less human resource to chair the committees and so on. Number 2, idea 2, let go of our rigidity, especially around structures. The structures as we know them. We need to lighten up and require fewer people. And I think part of that is just we just don't need the density of the structure that we've known. Idea 3, we need to let young people lead, listen. We need to be listening and giving them space. They will be better at naming and guiding the evolution of Quakerism. And we know this historically. Friends World Committee for Consultation began because young friends said, we need to come together after World War I and continue to work for peace across the ocean, between our countries, between Europe and the Americas. And they were really instrumental in getting FWCC started. And in Philadelphia Yearly Meeting in 1955, it was young people that insisted that it was silly. This split was silly. And, they insisted on coming back together. And in 1955, Philadelphia Yearly Meeting came back together. Idea number 4, and meeting life, our concerns, even our conversations must be relevant. There is a real urgency that we must speak to the issues of our time, whether it's climate change, peace, the range of things we are concerned about, because they're all matters of spiritual importance. And people come to meeting seeking this kind of thought. Think about walking into a new meeting if you were not a friend. What would it be like? I want to share a quick story that I heard from Alicia McBride from FCNL. She said they're doing workshops with young people, not Quaker, young people who come and learn advocacy and so on. And they're so excited. They're so on fire. And they say, where's the nearest meeting I could go to? I want to find the Quakers. Where are they? And they'll give them the nearest meeting to that person. They'll go one Sunday. And guess what? They don't go back. Why? What is it about our meetings that don't draw someone in to help understand what's urgent for us and what's important to us? We need to be talking. That needs to be the conversation. And the fifth idea is really the question of who is responsible for the vitality of friends. Who is responsible? If a meeting is not working very well, where do they go? They might go to a yearly meeting. I would posit that monthly meetings should be going to the next stronger meeting. Find out how does your meeting do it? Why are you so healthy? Within a quarterly meeting, you might have 2 or 3 strong meetings, and then you have about 6 meetings that are kind of doing okay, but could be doing better. How do we learn from each other? How do we reach out? And I would also say that yearly meetings could expand their mission to include the health and vitality of its meetings. And, yearly meetings do some of that work, but I would also say that yearly meetings and FGC, FUM, EFCI, and FWCC don't have the capacity to really do that effectively. And we need to support and help enlarge that resource. I've spoken too long. I suggested before when we were planning this that we have a way to tell each other that maybe we've spoken too long. And these guys said, oh, no, we can manage it ourselves. Now they might regret that. Okay. Well, let us pause for just a moment to help sink in that the query about our meetings and our communal experience. Thank you, friends. Our third query is this. What does this say about our hope for friends in the future? What does this look like when friends abide together in the life and power? I do at times feel hopeful for the future of the Religious Society of Friends because I know the strength of our convictions and of our faith, abiding together in God and in our communal commitments. We will thrive if we are able to let go of what has been in order to let new ways come. Quakers, through waiting worship and listening, will evolve. We're good at evolution. We're really quite good at that because we're listening. We're listening to what God has for us. So I say, bring on the evolution. I believe we have an imagination for a world where each person is loved, where we can raise our children well and support our families. I believe we have an imagination for a world without war and without violent conflict. I believe we have an imagination for a world in which respect and love for all humanity and our natural world come before all else. And I believe this all comes out of our listening to God and saying yes to the invitation we hear over and over. Luckily, I've been very lucky to work for friends most of my life. And I've answered yes, even when it's not always been clear just how I would manage. But I've always had faith that if God leads me to it, God will lead me through it. Dedicating your life to the work of God in this world, however that looks to you, it is different for each one of us. That is what will serve both friends and the world. For me, it has been important to be faithful and clear and to feel great joy in serving God and in serving you, my friends. I've had a rich and full life, dedicating it to what God has for me to do and be. I hope as friends we can see each other through the lens of God's love and dedicate ourselves to the new ways God will call us, is calling us now, calling us to be fearless and prophetic, to discover how we can minister to humanity and to the natural world and commit ourselves to whatever is ours to do. We can't afford to play small. To listen and hear God's promptings and to be ready to say yes. And we must listen. So in closing, I want to challenge us, along with Marge and Cherice, to think freshly about Quaker attitudes and structures that bind us. Let us suspend all judgment as Jesus did. Let us cling to God's unchanging hand and listen to God's promise for us to be set free, to live in radical love and radical faith and love in all things. Let us participate in the new creation.
So I treasure each individual who's learned to seek out that holy voice inside when chaos erupts around us. It may involve finding a place to sit in silence and to reach inward to the core of the being. And I've been slowly learning how important it is to be able to find that deep center when things are going wrong. It is so easy to get scattered and torn about that, but it takes work, takes practice. But there's a really wonderful inner ear and an inner eye, an inner sense of touch, all these things that can keep us attuned to that life that is all around us. Making use of these inward gifts of seeing and hearing beneath all the pressures of the ego and the vagaries of the culture around us, might we come to see ourselves as bands of everyday prophets? That's the way I've come to sort when you ask me about the future. That's what I hope for us, that we might become a series of bands of everyday prophets. Such bands are full of ordinary people who take time every day so that they listen well for the beat, the pulse of life, and are willing to take up the discipline of learning the music that harmonizes many voices and instruments and making of them a kind of a whole. The interplay of what some call eternal truths and the possibility of hearing a fresh rhythm or seeing an environment with a new comprehension is part of creating a community that's not caught up in the damaging lies and divisiveness around us. These are all too prevalent. Often the prophetic life starts with self-knowledge and personal healing, practices that are part of joining the band, the life, the light, the power, the light, which is such a powerful conductor, is also relentless in allowing us to see the painful aspects of our attitudes and behaviors. Peace is not just about protesting war, but it's initially felt within your heart and in your soul. We truly believe the way of peace and justice. We have a hard task ahead of us as friends to show a model of how one might live in peace with people who have a very different view of the world. And we have had a very strong experience of what happens when that doesn't happen. But I do think we still know that this is a goal. This is something that we have ahead of us to show that it's possible to live on this planet in a way that is respectful, that does no violence to others, makes space for the variety of life the creation has put before us.
Speak up, Marge.
The prophetic voice is nurtured by communities that know the reality of the new creation and that world that might fulfill our deepest hopes. And such a body is filled with everyday prophets, and it nurtures occasional individuals who call the community to account, as well as those who carry their deepest hopes into the wider world. Speed a band of everyday prophets possible for friends? I believe so, but not as an easy task to take up. I believe it's at the core of what we're about. Attention to that inward guide that breaks us open to hearts and remakes them with compassion. Prophets know the touch of the light and are willing to follow it where it leads as it knits together our relationships. Such everyday prophets are at once ordinary and radical, humble and bold. They act out of weave of mercy and justice, valuing every being on the earth. May we cherish all those who take up the calling. The depth of listening is one of Friends' gifts to our local communities and to the world. The inner dimensions of our being, if we attend to them and nurture them, allow us individually and corporately to be vehicles for that life. And this power that is more than any one of us, it may flow through all of us and each of us. It will not necessarily show us an easy way. In fact, faithfulness may require much of us. I believe that our times of worship allow us to probe our own hearts and learn its own vulnerabilities and strengthen our capacity to lead others in the way God shows us. And similarly, we have tools to share with others that we might spread nonviolent practices throughout the communities where we live. And might we care for the most vulnerable around us even as we help the wounded to heal and grow.
Thank you both. And Marge, I love that phrase of everyday prophets. Yes. So that's something that I really love about Friends is in our best moments, we are those bands of everyday prophets. And we listen to the Spirit in our communities and we live that out in the world around us. We see a vision of the new creation, the beloved community, and we take steps in that direction together. I'm so grateful to be part of a community that really makes space for that. And even though we're not perfect, I really appreciate our attempts. We often also in the past have disowned or discounted our prophets. So I think that is something to be aware of in this generation as we listen to those prophetic voices arising from our meetings. We're doing some really amazing work. It was so fun and enlivening and meaningful to go today with the Earthquaker Action Team to do the bank action together and to practice how to do nonviolent direct action that we can take back to our own meetings and regions. So thank you everyone that was able to participate and everyone that held us in the light during that time. Many of us showed up at that demonstration to express our unwillingness to cooperate with financial systems that are enabling fossil fuel extraction and use. Many friends are also working on repairing relationships with Indigenous people and unlearning ingrained white supremacy culture. We're not perfect, but we are taking steps in the direction of the world and community we want to see. And so I'm still here. I'm still in this community. I'm still a Quaker, and I'll continue to do whatever I can to live out the ideals of this tradition that I love. And so I think that this goal of abiding together in the life and power, or this, maybe it's not a goal, that's really speaking of white supremacy characteristics, right? This relational intention of living together in the life and power is learning to truly abide together, to connect to the vine and cling fiercely to one another in our different branches, to pass that lifeblood from limb to limb of the vine, to dig our roots down deep to the living water, to receive light and dark in their seasonal rhythms, to learn to abide here in the places where we are, in our neighborhoods, in our actual watersheds and bioregions. I want to see friends really living out these ideals by being everyday prophets, not as lone saviors, but as communities, as people who belong to one another and the land in ways that are radical and faithful. I want us to be a community that participates in transformative change toward a just and sustainable world. Quakers shouldn't try to do this by ourselves. The theme this week is listen so that you may live, and this is literal. Most of us have to learn to listen to another way of thinking and being on this planet, because the planet can't sustain the way we're currently living. So we need to listen to a new way, listen to voices that maybe we aren't paying as much attention to. I love that we have this plant on the stage here with us, this other species, learning to listen to those around us that maybe aren't human even. And we don't have to do this by ourselves. We can listen to the spirit and one another through the people around us and people who aren't necessarily part of our normal networks, other species, our regions. We can learn to listen for the joy of abiding together, the life and power that comes from solidarity, for the love and true peace that come from resisting evil and co-creating a transformed new creation. So I have two brief suggestions for how we can courageously abide together in this life and power. The first is to shift our worldview. And this is a shift from an individual perspective to a collective one. And if you would like to know more about this, I'm happy to share, or you can get one of the books back there. But shifting, I talk in some of my writing recently about this shift from viewing the light coming to us vertically from the spirit to only humans as the way the light interacts with us as an ecosystem, that we need the plants to give us oxygen and to transform the light so we can have nourishment. And we participate as part of that community, the light moving through the whole community of all life. And so that's one way to maybe transform our worldview from within our friends' tradition. And the second is learning to abide where we are in our locations. So for many of us who are part of settler communities, we have moved around a lot. My ancestors in the Quaker tradition moved across the frontier until they, used up the topsoil and had to move farther west. But there's no more farther west to move. And we need to learn a new way. We need to learn how to live where we are and participate in a healing community that we do not have the tools for. If we're European Americans, we need to listen and have humility and learn from others. But learning to live and really be placed in the places where we are. So I'll leave it with that our work is a major shift in how we live and function in this world. And that happens through continuing to abide together in the spirit that we know and expanding our community of who is part of us to include the whole community of all life, and focusing on the places where we are participating in those healing communities. Let's just take a brief pause to reflect on what we've heard here tonight. Friends, may we listen. May we find communities to journey with. May we connect with that of God in everything as well as everyone. Amen.
Yes.
Thank you, friends. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Don't want to be. Not very well. Do you want to grab one of these ones? Yeah. You can.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to remind friends that there's a book table in the back. And for those of you that would like to have ask questions and engage with our speakers more, just come to the front and fill the rows. And those that have late night activities or a late night date with your pillow, go in peace and rest well.
Oh my.
She went away.
We lost her. Oh my. Yeah. Thank you.
How you doing?
Need to stand up, but I have to remember to stand up slowly.
Slowly, intentionally.
Intentionally. But yeah.
Really wonderful. It was really good.
Good. We didn't know what it would sound like. We didn't know. We kept changing, but all three of us were constantly.
Came together. So
Yeah, it really did.
just all came together. So
Yeah.
nobody got up and left.
I presume those are folks going out to get their children.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, that's 8:45. They have to go get the kids.
yeah,
So
yeah.
8:45. So,
But
yeah.
Do you need anything that we can bring?
I don't think so right now. I'm trying to decide whether I'll stay around for the Q&A, but
Yeah. I think we'll
That-
move chairs down.
Let me get a card. Did John have a plan?
I don't think so. I think John is on to his next thing. Maybe we can, let's move some of these
Got-
chairs.
That was what I was thinking, that we
Take some of those and
big
make
chairs
it.
and make this circular, we can take
There.
these down. whatever.
Because you were sitting on one of those, right, Marge?
Yeah.
So those work for you.
yeah, they worked.
Probably work for Cherice.
Yeah. They were just fine. Yeah. Okay. Huh. Yeah.
I'll let you do that.
The dream of Dixie. Yeah, the dream of Dixie Steiner.
Yes, yes.
No, I've not heard about this.
It's a fantasy story.
Ha.
that I wrote, inspired by a true experience at Bayard Rustin.
Ah, yes,
Bayard Rustin.
I did.
A lot
I
of
know
people
of him.
don't because
Yeah.
he's gay.
Yeah,
So, and,
he was an amazing man.
I was inspired by an experience that was mentioned in a book called Victories Without Violence by a Quaker lady in England.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I can go ahead and take the microphone.
Ah, good idea. That would be
I took
helpful.
the story and that and I
I need to.
the world because of guidance where he got to be fed. He was refused service when he was traveling around.
Oops, there's your, we don't need your handkerchief.
It's not live. Friends, if you would like to join us for Q&A, please take a seat in the front.
I don't think
Well,
I'm not sure about it.
said it was. It is not on.
Yeah, she just turned it off.
Oh, she just turned it on. Thank you so much. I feel much more empowered now. Thank you. Friends, if you would like to come and engage in discussion with our panelists, you're welcome to come down in front and have a seat. And please allow them to have a seat.
For friends who are in the building, by sitting in the front and having the speakers sit here, we'll be able to include our friends who are on Zoom and looking forward to participating in this as well. Somewhere up there. I'm not sure where.
So I'm not sure how, we'll get everybody down, but we had a good conversation going between Gretchen and I think
That's so
they
great.
want to continue that, so we
Okay.
just need to get a microphone.
So are they going to just pass one mic?
I think that one
And
works.
this one is live. So how about this one?
Both of these should be just a nod to. Yeah, it sounds like, there we go. There we go. So we have a mic for the questions and we have a mic for the speakers. So those that would like to continue in conversation here, please.
Are you going to be a mic runner? You want me to?
Yeah, I can do that. Mike Stewart, yes. Yes. We want to have our mics passed with deliberate intention rather than run.
For the record, putting your hand on the microphone like that doesn't work. You gotta point it away from your phone.
Yeah, well, I was putting it down as well.
Okay, a chair is probably.
This one is on notice. This one's on.
Hello again, friends on Zoom and in the room, Zoom and room. It's time for some Q&A with our wonderful panelists. And I'll start with asking for a question from the room. I see one hand. I see two hands. I see three hands. Can we start with you, friend in the blue? And I'm going to, and Paul's going to bring the mic to you.
Okay, I'm Gail Brody from Twin Cities Monthly Meeting. And I'd like to hear Gretchen expand on what we were talking about when we reconfirmed about the people from FCNL who never came back to meeting and why you thought that was. And if it's partly meeting not welcoming them or if it was not the depth they were used to or what.
Good. Thank you, Gail. And you had the same question. What did that mean? And I had another conversation with a woman here who had moved and she went to a new meeting thinking, oh, great, I'll just go to this meeting and fit in, and it'll all be fine. But it wasn't. So she went to a meeting and she didn't find the conversation engaging. They were kind of just pointing her to the cookies and coffee and not saying, who are you? Why have you come to our meeting? Who are you? What are you concerned about? So I think it's about being relevant and having even just conversation that's engaging. And I think it's as simple as that.
You want to respond to the question?
Sure. I'll say I've experienced this as when I've moved to other places than attended meetings. I won't name the meeting that I went to for about a year, and like every time my husband and I would go, people would be like, "Oh, are you new?
Oh gosh,
We've never seen you before." And it's nice that they were engaging us in conversation, but we're going regularly and they didn't recognize us until we had a baby. Then when we started bringing our baby, they recognized us right away. But there was another meeting where I brought a group of college students to check out an unprogrammed meeting, and both of these are unprogrammed FGC meetings. And I brought a group of college students, and the meeting was just so welcoming and excited to talk to them, and gave them food and answered all their questions and just expressed really excitement that they were there. And so then those students wanted to come with me to meeting every week while they were there for the semester. So I think there are ways of welcoming people in that can be helpful. And those students also wanted to know where they could go to a meeting when they went back home. And some of them started attending meetings with more or less success. But I think the ones that have success have a way to do some of the things that they're doing at FCNL, right? Like they're getting engaged in something that is really meaningful, that actually makes a difference in the world, that gives them a way to take action together with a community, to get to know a group, that they're working on something that they're really excited about, which I know like you're all probably going, but none of them will join our committees because nobody wants to join committees. But they are willing to do things like, hey, let's advocate on this bill, or let's discern about what we want to do on this particular topic this year so that we can, you know, do whatever advocacy or some other thing that they're excited about. So there are ways to draw students in, or young people or new people, in ways that they can get really excited about staying. You just kind of have to find something that they connect with.
Thank you both. What occurs to me is, and I've been a member of various meetings on the East Coast and the West Coast, all unprogrammed. And I would say, you know, Friends, there's often spoken of as a mystic activist split. And often the mystics are older and the activists are younger, not necessarily, but I find that the meetings where the spirit is alive and people are really engaged in what we are called to do, which is to be ever attentive for and faithful to the promptings of the Spirit, the leadings of the Spirit. And in so many places, that is not alive. And I really think that it's up to the people in the meeting community to do what we're called to do. And, you know, this religious society drew thousands and thousands of people because people were asked to step up and engage. And as Cherice said in her talk to North Pacific a couple of years ago, there were the valiant 60, but there were the boring 600 supporting those 60, you know? Not everybody's going to be sitting on the floor of Chase Bank, but what about the people who aren't, who could, anyway, blah, blah, blah. But I really, you know, and I love that I'm pretty close with Marcelle Martin, and I love the work she's doing on faithfulness groups, because it's really about getting people engaged with each other, the community that you've all spoken of, and using that community to be more faithful.
I guess I'm using that.
Can I add just a very quick addition to that? And I totally agree. The deeper, the more compelling it is to want to return to meeting. In my meeting years ago, a young person went off to college, and when she came back, one of our meeting members asked her to share with the meeting how is her spirit thriving in college. And just asking her that question was like, you know, you've been away from us for a little bit. We want to know how it's going for you spiritually. That's the kind of question. Yeah.
Thank you, friends. Do we have any questions on Zoom at this point? Do you know, Paul?
Hold on.
Oh, okay.
There is one that they're on.
Okay.
Oh.
Should we come back to them in a second, Carl?
Was that?
Can we come back to the Zoom person in a moment?
Yeah, we can come back.
Okay, great. Susan, did you have a question?
Yeah. So I'm Susan Gunn. I'm from
Like an ice cream cone.
representing Switzerland Yearly Meeting. And I'm here because we are a collection of tiny meetings with one medium size. And we are sort of getting tired and losing energy and feeling that maybe we have no future. And there's a small group that is trying to, they're thinking back to the civil rights movement. And that's when people started to come into Quakers in great numbers. And because we had an issue that we were dealing with that was urgent. And I don't feel that sense of urgency here. But we who are in Europe, we've got that war on in our back door.
And those tiny meetings, in Poland and Hungary and with refugees. And we've got this nuclear reactor that's mined and it's got explosives on its roof. And it's much more immediate for us, but I don't feel that. But here we have the threat to democracy. And it's just tonight that I heard this being spoken of. And this.
Yeah, you have to open my close.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's.
You really have to like eat it.
Okay. But my point is what do you see as being the way that we can do things differently now to getting a burr under our saddle, getting a fire in our belly? The reason I came is I was hoping that we could establish some linkages between these meetings and these social concerns committees and individuals who want to work on urgent issues. Do you see any openings?
Friends, this is Debbie on the phone.
Hold on. What's Debbie? Can you hold on, please?
Absolutely.
Okay, it's still here. Okay. Anyway, there's a lot of things that we actually know how to do. And we've been hearing examples of this. And I think more that we can make connections and build those relationships and reinforce things. And it's often, if you have one really engaged person over in this meeting, and maybe they have to get support from somebody at, some other meetings and such that might not be right there. But there's times when it's lonely work, and there's times when it's just really exciting. And we're being pushed, I think, right now at this. There's so much in the society around us that's pushing us into thinking differently. Not just going about the ordinary everyday business of our meetings, but to reach out and do things that feel hard.
I think there's a danger in being like, oh, there's that issue over there. We should get involved in it because it's happening. And so, and there are a lot of issues. I wonder what the Spirit is working on in the hearts of the people in your meeting. And I think one of the best ways to find other people who are working on that is to go out to meetings of people that are working on that issue and get to know the neighbors in your neighborhood that care about whatever issue that the Spirit has laid on your heart. And also it can be really meaningful to the neighborhood to open up your meeting house to hold events and, work on whatever justice issues that they're working on in your building. And that can become a neighborhood center that people recognize. Justice events go on here. People are working on exciting things here. This is a space in our community that is open to us to think creatively and to prepare for doing the justice work that our neighborhood is called to. So inviting people into your space is one way, although I think a lot of times we want people to come to us and we're like, why isn't this working? So a lot of times it's important to first go out and meet the people who are doing the work already, find out how you can be in solidarity by building relationships first, and then seeing how your meeting might be involved in that work.
I've been to Switzerland Yearly Meeting. Maybe we've met there, but I recall there were interpreting into 4 different languages within a circle of friends, of 30 friends. You're small. It's a very small yearly meeting made up of not too many different meetings. So that's a challenge in itself. I think about, France yearly meeting does a lot of peace work and it might be there are other yearly meetings you might be able to connect with and do some work with them. I don't know if that appeals or not, but you're a very small group, but we all know that small can be very powerful.
Thank you for the question and for the answers. I think we're ready to hear from someone on Zoom. Can you make it so, Carl?
I think she can just. Debbie, you can go ahead now.
This is for Gretchen Castle. Gretchen, this is Debbie Reagan, William Penn College, class of 69. Are you there, Gretchen?
Yeah. Hi, Debbie. I'm just going to come.
Your father and mother, David and Ellie, are screaming with joy. I've never heard these speak before. This is amazing. I think the last time I saw thee was about 6 years. You were 6 years old. You have totally blown my mind. They would be so proud of you. And please give my best to your two older sisters.
Thanks.
Oh my God, Gretchen! I used to live in Philadelphia, and I missed you. Just wasn't there. We weren't there at the same time, and I just wanted to tell you, David and Ellie are shouting with joy. I'm telling you, I know they are. They were, your dad was my favorite professor, and he was an amazing guy, and so was Ellie. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Gretchen.
Thank you so much. That's very, very sweet of you. And it's great to hear from you.
I went to 5 colleges and your father was my favorite professor of all time.
Oh. Wow. If I could only tell him, I tell him all
the time. Dr. Castle, I'm telling you.
My mother's still alive. She's 95 years old.
Oh, she is? Oh, please give her my love.
I will remember you to her.
Absolutely.
So
oh my God. I'm so grateful she's still here. I had no idea.
Thank you, Debbie. Is there another question in the room? Carl.
Yeah, I'm aware that Putin rants endlessly about the Ukrainians being homosexual and transgender, that it's because the Republican Party can't come up with a reasonable ideological thing. They're just wailing on the trans kids. And I have felt for 15 years that these church splits around same gender marriage, that's the proxy issue for this deeper question of where is power? Do we have hierarchical power, and what that mess is? And I'm not trivializing the real suffering and the wrongness of discriminating against same-gender loving and FLGBTQC persons, but it feels to me like it's this proxy. We can't have a conversation about either the real thing or whatever it is. I wonder if Cherice could talk about what your perception is. I mean, you walked through this thing. I haven't walked through it. I get to be very smug about being a, liberal unprogrammed friend, and we're kind of over it.
Oh, I can talk about it. Well, yes. So this is definitely a proxy issue, and it was incredibly sad that our yearly meeting split in January 2017. Which is, the inauguration of Trump. We tried really hard to do all the things to work towards building a relationship, and yet this political wedge was used to split the yearly meeting. And so I do think it's a proxy and it's a political divide. And I think within that political divide, there's also it's a proxy for this deeper question, like you're saying, of power and authority, and who has power in our society. And a lot of that is white supremacy and domination hierarchies, right? So all the dualistic hierarchies, whether that's male and, males are closer to God than females, or white and people of color, or straight and LGBTQ, that we have this hierarchical model where anyway, you all get that, but that's the question. Are we going to be that model, or are we going to be collaborative? Are we going to be working together so that everybody gets what they need? And so the frustrating thing, of course, is that when we work in a collaborative model, if the other people are working in a competitive model, they compete with us and take everything, right? And that's what happened in our yearly meeting, unfortunately, because we weren't trying to compete. We were trying to build relationship and collaborate and work together towards a solution. And we didn't want to cause harm. And so this is a challenging thing for us to figure out what to do as friends, because we want to be peacemakers. So one of the challenges too is like, was it right for those of us who are LGBTQ affirming, there are better ways to say that, but who are believing in equality, to try to collaborate with people who were calling into question their personhood and right to marriage, right? So that's another piece, is as friends, when we're trying to build peace, where's the line between solidarity and collusion, right? So us trying to appease people who are being discriminatory because we want to stay in relationship, that's equally harmful, right? So there's not necessarily a good answer here unless everyone truly comes to the table in a trustworthy way. And so our model as friends is built on, we have to be trustworthy with each other. We can't do Quaker business process. We can't be a Quaker community unless we can trust each other. So we have to build relationships that can withstand that level of trust in our meetings. And it's possible to go to a meeting with people and sit in silence for an hour and not trust them at all, and just like to sit in silence with them and just not get in conflict with them, right? But that's not really the life and power, right? And that's why I think maybe some people aren't drawn to that form of worship, right? Are you building that kind of trust that you can withstand these kinds of disagreements and figure out how can we honor that of God in each other for reals, right? How can we work towards deep levels of intimacy in appropriate ways with all of those in our meetings and in our community? Can we work against systemic problems, systemic oppression together? Can we name that in ourselves and in each other and still be in a relationship? So that level of trust is, I think, what really draws people into meetings and helps us to stay together through differences. Mm-hmm. So we had obviously lost that in our yearly meeting, and it's easy to kind of hold people in your meeting at arm's length because it's hard to be in that level of relationship.
I'd like to just briefly thank the panel again and ask if you're all holding up okay for another at least question or two.
Hey, Mark, you can say no.
Right. There's another way to say that. I'm going to check in again after this next question. How's that sound? We're all going to take care of ourselves and each other. Go ahead, Brent.
I was very moved by your statement of the light flowing through all of us and all living things. And I was reminded of the Native American expression, all of my relations. And this is not a question. I'm just hoping that when we meet again at Haverford, that we invite in the stories of some of our Native peoples, because I think their reality has still a lot to teach us.
Thank you. Do you see a hand? Yeah. The mic is on its way. Go ahead, Kathy. All right, let's see if I can find the words for this question. It kind of, as I've listened to many Alaska Native people hold the lived traumas and the intergenerational traumas from the missionaries coming to their villages uninvited. And I hear that there are still Quaker churches sending out missionaries to various places around the world. I know all of you have had connections and experiences with Quakers across the branches, and I feel the weight and the worry of friends continuing to missionize, and it's hard for me to imagine that it's completely different and a whole different experience than it was 150 years ago or 100 years ago. And I wonder if you have any light to shine on that concern of our Quaker faith writ large. Because Alaska Native people, a Quaker is a Quaker, and they don't know all the different flavors and branches and splits and that. And so, I don't know, I'll stop there. I hope you understand kind of where I'm coming from and what you might have to say about that.
Northwest. Well, I think Northwest Yearly Meeting might be helpful to have that experience. I can say something too.
My yearly meeting being most culpable, I have been volunteered. My yearly meeting, that's our heritage, right? And we haven't sent any missionaries in our last 6 years as Sierra Cascades. There's something amazing about having a faith and a joy in your spiritual life that is so strong that you want to share it with other people, and that you want to be in relationship in a way that helps people around you to dig deeper in their spiritual life. And that can be so joyful and contagious. Other people catch fire, And so I think that sometimes we can withdraw too far as Quakers because we see the harmful ways that evangelization is done. And then we don't share about our experiences at all. I think what we have done in the past is we have assumed that our culture goes along with our spiritual experience. And that's where the harm comes in, I think. That rather than just sharing, wow, I have this good news of this spiritual experience and I'm connected to the divine life. And do you want to hear about it? Have you ever had an experience like that? It's, hey, in order to believe this same thing as me, you have to, dress like a Westerner and use English. And, that's the tame version, of course. And then all of the atrocities of the forced assimilation schools go beyond that in harm and trauma and physical violence and death sometimes. So I think I don't know. There were times in our former yearly meeting, Northwest yearly meeting, they called them friends serving abroad in the last decade before we left. We were forced to leave. And there was a different model of missions where people are going to work in another country, get a job, learn the culture, learn the language, develop relationships, and share about their spiritual experience with people who want to talk to them about spiritual things. So that's a different way of doing things that hopefully doesn't enforce the cultural change that was done in previous missions. And I won't speak to like all evangelical friends or all missionaries right now, but that's at least not as harmful and only in ways that people are inviting, I guess, or are open to connecting with.
And I would confirm that from a Friends United meeting standpoint, that it's changed a lot in recent years. It's not expecting a culture to take on an American culture, but rather to share the good news. And I mean, I've known there was a missionary, and he would never call himself that, but we'd just call it a traveling friend. Anyway, who's doing this in Ireland? So it's not always, it's not always global South and global North. But I have a proposal, which is we could invite missionaries, traveling friends from Africa to help us deepen our spiritual experience in our meetings. So let's bring missionaries from Africa to the U.S. and not call them missionaries, but help us learn what they know. And that's what it's about. It's about that spiritual hospitality. It's about the reciprocity. It's about learning from each other, building relationships. I think that's how most friends groups would think about it today.
Did you have anything on that, Marge?
Things to be honest. But I don't. I think you could take the test down if you wanted, just to be heard. That one with the earring. It's a hearing aids. It's okay. Yeah. Anyway, one of the things I wanted to say is there's a lot more things that are sort of happening under the surface, and they're, Kenyans going to South America. Okay, yeah, this I can tell the difference. But Kenyans going to South America, or they're just all these examples of cross-pollination. And when you work off of a visiting friend model where someone comes in and shares their experience, but then opens it for, it's this reciprocity, this back and forth, this relationship, those kinds of things. It's so different from the missionary work where you're going to move, come in and bring your whole culture that you're, which may in some places be a good thing. And I know when I was in the 1991 World Conference, Miriam Wary, who is one of the keynote speakers there, would have a powerful speech. But part of it was, you can go, if you go around the country and look and see these villages around, they're Quaker. They don't, the ones that are Quaker, they don't drink. They don't beat their children. They don't beat their wives, this long, and really made life better for people. So it's not as neat and clean in terms of missionaries are terrible, but clearly horrible things have been done in the name mission work as well. So, and early friends, one of the things they, where I think there's a difference in this, small phrases and such, that we like to talk about answering that of God and everyone. And that's what I believe you're really, you're really nice. And it's just really puts, that of God, it's just all wonderful. A lot of the early friends' use of that phrase was in terms of encountering them, what people were doing things totally wrong, and answering that God and everyone was to engage with bringing them to God and changing their behaviors, not just accepting them as they were. And I think it's probably absolutely apocryphal, but I give the idea of that that someplace Fox said, answer that of God in your enemies, it'll throw them into confusion. But that's one of those phrases, like wear your sword as long as you can, that we think about.
It feels like it's about that time. I want to see if there's another question on Zoom by any chance. Friends, let's turn off the mics and close in that sense and continue the conversation forever. Thank you.
Thank you
Is that all right, panel?
for your interest.
Okay.
Yeah.